Hey guys, how's it going? I'm the Duke of Italy, your favorite lo-fi music YouTuber, and welcome back to a classic album review, a minor sort of quarter annual series I'm thinking about doing, where I will review classic albums. And I just think on this channel, I review a whole lot of just not good albums or albums that are just I have a differing opinion on or maybe something interesting on. But I would like to give you guys my recommendations out there because I do a little bit, but there are some things that are maybe not the most popular album choice that I thought maybe you guys would enjoy. And a little amendment I'm doing to a previous review. I reviewed Moving Pictures by Rush. I'm changing that from a Almost as Good as Die Lit to a Based in Red Pill. It's still a 9, but basically what I'm saying is really, really, really good. Great. Every song on there is great, but I do think that maybe it drags in a couple of spots, but overall just still look really great. The reason I'm talking about that is because today I'm talking about another album in the same vein of 80s prog. And if you're like me out there, you're probably like, oh brother, why are you talking about neo prog? I'm not talking about neo prog. I think neo prog is not that good. I'm actually talking about King Crimson today, one of my favorite bands, with their amazingly underrated album, Discipline. So Discipline is the 8th studio album by King Crimson, basically led by Robert Fripp, with the only returning member on this album, other than the drummer Bill Bruford, formerly of Yes. So if you like Close to the Edge, you like Bill Bruford. Fragile is Bill Bruford. His drumming is on this album, as well as some other King Crimson releases. The other members are Adrian Belew, of a whole bunch of different features in the past, where he collaborated with people like David Bowie, and someone else I mentioned recently, Tony Levin, on the bass and the Chapman stick, because if there's a song that he doesn't want to play normal bass, he'll play the Chapman stick. And that's something I'll get into a lot, but I just love the dynamism of the instrumentation on this album. It really shows that in rock music, you might not even need a bass, but you can replace it with a Chapman stick. And if you don't want to use the same roaring guitar sounds as before, you can replace it with something a little more technical. But anyways, if you guys don't know King Crimson, which if you're watching this video, there's a good chance that you do, King Crimson made In the Court of the Crimson King right here. You have probably seen this. If you follow any Mewcore, you've seen this. If you follow any album recommendation core, you've probably seen this. This album was ahead of its time, extremely pivotal in the formation of music. Probably invented prog, the sort of symphonic style that the 70s was kind of known for, even though it debuted in 69. But it did have a bit more of a jazzy bite, especially on the opening track. And the rest of the songs were very meditative and slow and kind of doom-oriented, where it was all about sort of giving the listener a sense of impending doom and hopelessness. But that is a very common theme among other King Crimson albums. But you've got a whole lot of other good albums too. Namely, Red has those insanely good guitar tones, just roaring guitar lines all over. The very meditative Starless, which is an amazing track. Honestly, what I think is the invention of post-rock in the track Providence, that song is incredible. I love that thing so much. If you can handle Moonchild, then this song will knock your socks off. You also got Lark's Tongues and Aspic, an album that's not my personal favorite by King Crimson, but it's got a really nice track list, and just the core melody of Lark's Tongues and Aspic Part 1 is just, it gets me every single time. I love that track, and there's a whole lot of other great songs too, like Cat Food, for example. King Crimson has a loaded discography, and I honestly hope after this video you guys check them out, because while I haven't dived into the entire thing, I definitely have some classic albums that are just amazing theirs. And before I get into this, I'm going to mention Discipline is not my favorite King Crimson album. My favorite is Red. I love Red so much, and I will talk about that more. But today we're talking about Discipline, because honestly I find it pretty interesting of an album, probably their most interesting release, because it's after a 7-year hiatus. The band just didn't exist, and then Robert Fripp decided, let's round the band together. He calls up Bruford and he gets him on board, and he gets 2 new members. What resulted was an incredible mix of progressive rock, as Fripp was known for, jazz, of course, because it's prog, new wave with the influence of Belew, probably a little bit of post-rock. I mean, it's a King Crimson album. Some ambient at a couple tracks, and some math rock, which Honestly, I don't know how much math rock would have existed before this point in time. You could probably argue maybe Zappa kind of invented math rock. There's probably some mentionings before, but this thing you can really tell on a few tracks. But anyways, I've been rambling long enough. Let's get into the track list. The track list kicks off with Elephant Talk. Elephant Talk I find very interesting because it's basically an introduction to the album where Belu's vocals are like David Byrne of Talking Heads. And first time I listened to that, I immediately clicked that together. And that's probably why this is such a recognizable new wave release instead of just pure prog or math rock. But the thing is, Belu's impression, even if it's not an impression, his vocal portion here is pretty amazing. The way he talks, it sounds like someone going completely manic. Anyways, it starts with Tony Levin on bass, and I remember reading about how they didn't know how to start the song off. They had it all made, but then Tony Levin said, guys, let me do it. And he's got the Chapman stick, and he starts off with these alternating notes, and then he just starts sequencing them together at this just rapid pace, and it almost comes off as like some inhuman instrument. It doesn't sound like a Chapman stick anymore until he gets into that core bass groove, which honestly, if it didn't inspire if Jerry was a race car driver, then I don't know what to tell you, because one, it sounds very similar, but this thing is funky. Unbelievably funky. This thing will get you schmoving instantly. Having this bass line that is toppled over with these sort of like jangly guitar lines is just something to really behold. I gotta say, Bruford really brings it to the table on this album, and this track is no exception. He can just be just destroying his kit, just rumbling all over, just going absolutely nuts. And he also knows how to induce some anxiety into you. There are times where he'll hold back or he'll let others hold back. It almost is like he treats the drums as a melodic instrument in the way where he'll leave someone else to solo while he's doing his own thing. But he can actually alternate the rhythm section between him and someone else, and you'll see that on later tracks. The construction of these tracks are amazing, and I can't just stop talking about it as a whole. I gotta talk about the lyrics here. The lyrics here don't make that much sense, to be completely honest with you guys, but it has a structure of A, B, C, D, and then E, where it's all talking about different kinds of talking in a way. It seems to be coming from sort of a crazy, cynical person, where they're just tired of all discussion, they want to be shut out of everything. Kind of hearkening back to 21st Century Schizoid Man, where it's a person who just wants to be shut away and left alone. But instead of a sort of like doom-esque jazz version, this thing is anxiety-inducing. One of my favorite things that Bruford does on this is every time the verse is introduced, he has this massive cymbal crash, which just sort of halts everything. I also love that he doesn't use that for the final verse, so it's almost like you just keep moving forward, and it's almost like the music is running you over. Basically, it's just a complete loss of reason as the song ends, with between the vocals and all the instruments together, it's all just crashing around, and the song is done. And then you're introduced to Frame by Frame. So Frame by Frame opens with this incredible guitar tapping part, which is amazingly good. The technical skill behind this line is beyond incredible. And you got Levin underneath on the bass, who's just running all over it. Meanwhile, you got Bruford in the back, who's not keeping the beat, but he's just shredding his kit at this point in time. It's just, the thing sounds like it's about to break. One thing that a lot of people talk about this track, and I have to as well, the guitars are phasing here. You got Belu and Fripp playing the same riff, but it starts in sync and then it just shifts out, and it's just rolling and rolling, and it just sucks you in, and it really gets you into the emotion of the song. It really kind of gives the album with similar sounds like this, almost like a sleepwalking feel, like you're so beyond tired, but you have to just keep moving or you're gonna get swallowed. The vocals here are singing, and it really shows that Belu can sing. He's not just someone who tries to be David Byrne. His vocals are incredible here. They actually sound really nice. He's got his own backup vocals that are like in his falsetto that are just sort of dancing over the top of his normal vocals, and it just accompanies itself really, really nicely. Of course, the lyrics are not nice, as you could probably see right here. They're quite ominous and disturbing. It's really just about someone having a complete anxiety attack where they just lose all sense of reason. And of course, Bruford is so tense on the drums. It is incredible here. It's got this sort of sense of paranoia, but like a sleepy just movement, especially through the vocals. This leads me to talk about Mate Kudasai, the next track. This is actually one of my favorite tracks on the album, but the thing about it that's not good is that it doesn't really match the rest of the album. It was actually intended to be for another Fripp project entirely, so, and you can kind of tell that just with basically the lyrical content. It's still not a positive song, but it's not really a character analysis given through the POV of someone having some kind of anxiety attack or mental breakdown. Instead, this is sort of a Madame Butterfly situation. Honestly, it works really well. These vocals are incredible, of course, and you got this nice sort of like slow, just sort of teetering groove in the background. If you guys actually look on the Spotify version of this album, or a lot of versions of the album out there, there is another version of Mate Kudasai towards the end. That was the version originally intended for the album, and it's accompanied by a few more seconds of Robert Fripp just with these monstrous sounding riffs underneath towards the second half of the song and after that, where it's just these just huge sounds. It almost is like someone's crying through a guitar, but like wailing, since they're just so large, and the effects on them are amazing too. They're a little hard to describe, but the emotion behind them is inexplicable. After that ballad, we might get the most tense song on the album, Indiscipline. So basically, the song kicks off with both Bruford and Levin just with this slow, almost monotonous pace, where Bruford's just playing one really low and ominous note, while Bruford's just tapping on his drum. And then, of course, guitars are added over the top, and then Bruford switches from his one beat until he's just shredding all over his kit, using every drum possible, but just sort of one at a time. It's almost like the song is starting up an engine before the actual groove kicks in, and then it's just sort of rolling ahead. One thing I really like about the song is that we're back to classic Red fashion with Robert Fripp's guitar tone here. It is monstrously huge. It is heavy metal. And Baloo has another spoken word song here, but it's a little different from the first one, where in Elephant Talk he was just kind of just loudly speaking. Here it's almost like he's talking to himself just to keep himself sane. One thing about the song that I really like is that Bruford's drumming is a little like Neil Peart's solos on Tom Sawyer, for example, except if you took that solo and made it a whole song just underneath, because he's just destroying his kit here. It's menacing. And I really love how the groove is going, and then it just cuts to hear Baloo just muttering to himself about how he might or might not like something. Particularly the line, "I repeat myself when I'm under stress," when it's repeated like 14 times or something like that, is particularly menacing, for especially if you aren't listening too closely. That repeats enough for you to notice it, and then you kind of click back into the album. And the thing is, a lot of these songs, if you don't pay too much attention, they're just kind of funky. They are funky, believe me, but this song is really like holds you close, and it's like, are you not listening to me? Up next we have Thela Hunjinji. Thela Hunjinji is really interesting because it was written with a few things in mind. First of all, it was inspired by New York City, mainly John Lennon's death about a year prior to this. And it was also inspired by Baloo walking out on the street to practice his lines, and then him getting approached by a gang and pretty much getting robbed. The song sounds a little bit like Frame by Frame with that really rumbly Levin bass tone, and it is just awesome with the way it works. Levin also has backup vocals here, and they're really low and bassy, and it feels like several people are just sort of descending upon you. Another thing to mention about this concept, if you take the words or just letters Thela Hunjinji, it's just an anagram for heat in the jungle. The song basically has these samples of Baloo muttering in the studio about how he had a tape recorder and he walked down the street and then he got robbed by this gang, and it sounds really tense. First time I listened to it and I didn't know the context, I genuinely thought it was someone talking about being in another country in a war zone, almost being a POW. Towards the end of the track, the instrumentals just turn super off kilter, which really increases the tension. And one of the things that really makes it for me is the end of the track has Robert Fripp's just roaring guitar lines over the top of the whole thing. Just really a testament for how he's really one of the best guitarists in Prague. This track is followed by one of the more ambient cuts, The Sheltering Sky. So on this track, you have these African slit drums, which have this really hollow tone to them, and it's like an actual note, and a little reminiscent of a lot of Tool material, especially the ending of Lateralis. And I could actually see that this song probably influenced a lot of Tool material, probably even most of it. I don't think that Danny Carey would be nearly as good of a drummer if not for the existence of Bill Bruford. But you got this really nice ambience with Tony Levin underneath, where he's just cranking out his bass with this like really rumbly tone, and it works super well. I don't know what it is about his bass tone, but it's just so menacing. There's some dynamism in this track because you actually got these synths as opposed to Mellotron and the string sections of previous albums. And some of the synths actually add a really unnerving portion of the song where really it would just be kind of funky and you would just kind of jam along to it. But there are a couple points where they pierce in a way that like scares you. It's like you're trying to distract yourself while on a walk somewhere that you shouldn't be, and then you hear something that's exactly what you feared. Closing off the album, we have Discipline. Discipline, Robert Fripp said, is one of his hardest songs he's ever had to play. I think after Fracture, this was the hardest song he had to play up until 1981, but I don't know after. This does what Frame by Frame was killing with the guitar phasing. You got more guitar phasing going on, and it's, again, incredible. The amount of time signatures in this track would put Midwest Emo to shame. I don't know them all by heart, but here's a screen cap of the Genius article. It's kind of nuts. This track really shows the real talent of everyone in the band, where everyone's kind of coming together in a way that's disciplined. Funnily enough, apparently a lot of this track was improv, as a lot of King Crimson tracks tend to be. I cannot confirm, though. So that's the album. As a whole, very tight. The emotions are incredibly consistent, and you could easily fish a concept out of this thing that would be totally plausible. The mix of everyone here in the instrumental section is beyond effective. Everyone brings their absolute maximum to the table, and when they bring their maximum to the table, it's maximum effectiveness, not necessarily just going way too fast to comprehend, because there are times where they slow it down and they use that time to remind you that you're not safe. Honestly, other than Mate Kudasai maybe not totally belonging on this album, and Thela Hunjinji maybe dragging a couple seconds, this thing is a masterpiece. Truly a masterpiece. There isn't a single track on here that I wouldn't say that there's something amazing about. Not just that, I think every track on here has several things amazing about them. Check this album out. This is truly a genius piece of work. There's so much emotion implied, either through the lyrical content, which never just spells it out for you, but you look at it and then you're terrified, or through the super ominous instrumentation through everyone in the party. The mix here is so amazing. Honestly, this thing came onto the scene when New Wave was happening, and then just kind of smoked out the whole genre. This is almost as good as That Lit. This album is a landmark. This is one of those albums that you really can't compare to that many things, but if you could, you know this would still beat it. I can't recommend this thing enough. This is actually one of those albums I will just straight up recommend to a person regardless of music tastes. There is something to be enjoyed on this album for everyone. Even if you don't like any of the really heavy progressive stuff on here, or the really just crazy lyrics, or any of Tony Levin's amazing bass work, which who are you? That man is so fine. And listen to Mate Kudasai, because Mate Kudasai is gorgeous. Everything on here has just such an immense range, yet feeling so compact. Please listen to this. I am practically begging you. Anyways, that's it for this video. I talked for a long time, but I just want to let you guys know that I am in love with this album. This thing is so good. I hope you guys are having a good day out there. If you enjoyed this video, I'd appreciate a like and subscribe. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, please comment down below, or my social medias are linked so you can go ahead and DM me there, or give me a follow if you feel like it. Anyways, I hope you guys are doing well out there. I hope to see you guys next time. Have a good day. Bye.